So today will hopefully be a teaser. There's no way you're going to get the Enneagram in 45 minutes or 40 minutes. But I'm hoping you get enough to be really interested. And I was trying to think on the way here today how to introduce what the Enneagram is about and how it relates to this. And what I thought about was that pretty much every morning I do dispute resolution internally with Enneagram related. And what I mean by that is I think about how I want to show up in the day, what matters to me, what values I have, and then I also think about my Enneagram type and its pull for doing something other than that. Because part of what the Enneagram talks about is what are the pulls we have internally that can pull us away from or support what actually matters to us. By the way, if any of this doesn't seem clear, please, again, I'm more of an interactive person than just a talking at you. And I want to give you a couple of quick examples. I'll go through the Enneagram, but I want to give you a feel for it, and also I want to give you a bit about the history of it briefly. So I'm thinking about things that have happened in the last week. I have two clients who are CEOs of large organizations who are a type that we'll get to pretty soon that is driven by comfort. Striving to feel comfortable, harmonious. And one of the things that happens to people who are striving for harmony is they avoid conflict. They may be very hardworking, but they avoid dealing with difficult decisions, difficult conversations. And so both of them now have a daily practice of getting up. First thing they do at work is make a list of what are the conversations I most would like to avoid today. And then they have those first. Because what they have, there's a competing commitment between their desire for comfort and their desire to support their companies to be of service. I had dinner last night with a coaching client who is at a very high level in an organization and is a type that doesn't like to feel conflict. And so he's avoiding feeling the tension between what the company needs and his loyalty to some of the people he's worked with for 20 or 30 years. So what the Enneagram can do is look at what are our internal conflicts between what most matters to us actually and a pull to be something different. Does that make sense so far? And so my goal is to have you be interested enough from what you hear today to decide you want to read more, to learn more. I mean, it's possible you get a sense of your type in a very short presentation. But the Enneagram is one of those things that really takes quite a while to explore. But it's also a tool that once you get it, you probably will use it daily for the rest of your life. I know I do. It's my single focusing point each day on how to bring out the best in me or what my most likely pitfalls are. So it's a very powerful system. History-wise, it's going to give you a sense of the Enneagram. I have slides there's a lot of personality systems you may have seen. They all kind of divide people into 2 by 2 by 2 matrices of one kind or another, Myers-Briggs. Yes. The Enneagram is the only one that's really different. And people thought for quite a while that in its present form, it came in around 1972. There was a guy in Chile who kind of put it together and then shared it with some people from the US. They spread it around in different communities. But it turns out, have any of you ever read Homer, the Odyssey and the Iliad? Well, when Homer goes off and when Odysseus goes off and fights the Trojan War, does the whole Trojan horse thing, and he's supposed to have, I don't know, 3 weeks sailing back to his house, and instead it takes him 20 years, something like that. He goes through 9 realms before he gets home. And those are in exact sequence types 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 of the Enneagram. So we know the system's been around at least 600 BC. It's referred to in ancient Egypt. And so we're talking about some very ancient knowledge about this, not just some new system for putting people into categories. Another thing about the Enneagram, to give you a sense of history, is that each Enneagram type is connected to a passion. And here passion doesn't mean a good passion. It means some kind of an emotional striving that gets in the way. And those happen to map directly onto the 7 deadly sins. Envy, lust, you might ask why the 9 Enneagram types and only 7 deadly sins. Well, it turns out that there were 9 if you go back to the origins, which is also interesting. And just a quick thing on the origin, I'll get into the Enneagram types in a minute, of those. There's this guy named Evagrius, who was one of the early desert fathers, 300 AD. And he'd go around to these monks who were meditating in the desert and say, how's it going? How's your prayer going? And what's getting in your way? And it turns out that there were 9 different things that were getting in people's way. And even the origin of the word sin was, how do you miss the mark? How do you not pay attention to what you actually want to focus on most? And so whether you have a religious orientation or not, the Enneagram shows us what pulls us off from what's actually most important to us. Why learn it? The basis of emotional intelligence starts with self-awareness. If I don't know what's driving me, if I don't know what's going on under the hood, I can't manage myself well. If I can't manage myself, I'm not going to effectively manage other people, including in dispute resolution. So it's about stepping back and going, what are my internal conflicts? What are the pulls in me between wanting to be of service, wanting to do a good job, wanting to have an impact on the world? What's going on internally that can get in the way of that? Make sense? This is a quote from Robert Keegan, a developmental psychologist, and it's about the more we're aware of, as far as what's going on inside of us, the more choices we have. And that things start out we're subject to a lot. So being subject to something means that it's having a pull on me that I wasn't even aware of. So I can't make choices about it. So you talk about things that are subject, things that have us, that are leading us without us being consciously aware of it. And again, there's 9 different flavors of that on the Enneagram. And then once we can see it, we can make choices. And so again, my practice every morning is to be aware of my Enneagram type, to be aware of how I do want to show up in the world, and to make choices about what's actually more important to me. And I'll send this slide deck, or these slides, so I'm going to do it quickly. We all have aspects of all 9 Enneagram types, but at the core we are one type. And that doesn't change in the course of your lifetime. What does change is our level of freedom within that type. And so every type has 9 levels of freedom that's different from the 9 Enneagram types. And the more we're at the bottom end of our type, the more we're really constricted. We keep doing the same thing over again and over again. And then we try to make choices to do something different, but we just keep on doing that. The higher we are in our type, the more we can express values that actually matter most to us. And in a given day, we'll go up and down. So this isn't like a stable thing. We all do tend to have a center of gravity where we hang out most of the time, and a range where we go on good days and bad days. And even though there's these 9 different levels in there within each type, if you're at level 1 or 2, you probably have millions of people who follow you all around the world. And if you're at level 8 or 9, you are either locked up in a mental hospital or a prison, or you should be. And so realistically, there's 5 levels that are relevant for most of us humans. And really the issue is, are we above the line or below the line? Are we at choice, or are we reacting? Are we aware enough of our type so that we can be aware of the pull and make a different choice, or are we just automatically playing it out? And until people learn the Enneagram, they're often surprised at how much they were playing out their type. I did that part already. That was 7 deadly sins. I'm going to be describing the types pretty quickly. Each one has a strategy. It's a way that I want to feel. And because I want to feel that way, I'm going to think in ways that support that, and then I'm going to act in ways that support that. If you do read more about the Enneagram, you might find type names that are different from what I have up here. Nobody owns the Enneagram, which is good and bad. There's really good material out there. There's really not good material out there. If you're interested, and you give me your card, I'll send you an initial way to explore the Enneagram online, some links of the website that I recommend most. I love that line. All models are wrong. Some are useful. This does not explain everything. It does have a lot to say. And again, there's no type better than any other type. The Unabomber and Einstein are the same type. Saddam Hussein and Mother Teresa. So depending on where we are, the level within our type determines how high of an expression our lives are. And this isn't like astrology where, if you're an Aries, you get along better with the Taurus. Any two people at a high level of freedom tend to get along really well and collaborate well together. Any two people at a low level tend to be in conflict. And so this becomes certainly useful for helping other people understand their own conflicts and what's getting in the way. But it's, I use the Enneagram daily with me and with clients as needed. So being aware of internal conflicts actually has the highest leverage in being a more effective human being, being a more effective professional. The Enneagram can be used to manipulate people. One of the early adopters was the CIA. I don't think they were using it to actualize people's potential. And so you can use what's driving people to manipulate them, but the purpose of it is to have people work more effectively together. We've lately been using the Enneagram a lot at high levels in the government of Alberta with teams, where people learn their types, they learn about each other, they learn about how would you know when I'm operating at a high level and a low level, what do you notice with me when I'm under stress. They happen to be a really quick way to understand each other on a much deeper level and what actually drives it. So it's actually a very rapid way of having people connect human to human in a way that helps them get their work done. The impact of context is important. Culture, every country tends to have a type. Canada has a type that's very different from the US. People of a certain type will show up very differently if they are from New York or Alabama. And so there's a complexity here of each Enneagram type has the same root, but how it shows up depends a lot on context. And at least the way my partner and I use it, my partner Sandra Hill, this is not about putting people in boxes. It's about helping us see the box we're already in and how to get out of it. So it's seeing the limitations that we might not have even been aware of, and then how to become more effective. Said all that already. When people understand each other's types, it also helps them recognize stress points and identify that. And when I go through the type, it'll be natural for you not to just be thinking about yourself, but thinking about spouses, colleagues, kids, parents, etc. It can be fun to try to guess somebody else's type. You really can't know what drives somebody. You can know surface behavior, but this is about what's really going on that's leading to that behavior. And so people are often wrong when they think they know somebody else's type. And it's not popular if you go home today and say, I got your type. And so again, there's 9 Enneagram types, and we divide the levels of freedom into high performance, average, and acute or chronic stress. And this is, again, like I said before, the person on the left operates at quite a high level of awareness. And on good days, it's really pretty remarkable. And on bad days, it's kind of a moderate pain in the butt. The person on the right lives at being an extreme pain in the butt and sometimes dips down low in there. So we each have a range in center of gravity. Okay. Any questions so far before I run through the 9 types? And again, each one is a strategy, probably the easiest way to understand the Enneagram. There's a lot of complexity, but understanding each type as a strategy is probably the highest leverage way to get a sense of what your type might be. Each one of these slides will have the same setup. There will be a name on top, which is the name from the Enneagram Institute, which we think is the best teaching site out there. What the striving is, 2 adjectives that particularly identify it, and then a list of adjectives that go from high average down to low average. So you can get a bit of a flavor for the range of the type. So, type 8, the challenger. At a high level, loves to be empowered, loves to empower others. A strong desire to make a difference in the world and to be comfortable carving new territories, going in places other people necessarily able to move forward even with obstacles, doesn't need to be liked to get there, really wants to make a difference in the world, often natural leaders. And a lot of physical presence, a lot of natural power. One of the things you'll see as we go through the Enneagram is that the qualities at the high end tend to be the opposite of what happens at the low end. So at the high end, this is the type that's very empowered. Wants everyone to be able to make a difference. And at average levels, when I demand to be powerful, and that's one of the key things that happens at the average level, part of my way of being powerful is to keep other people off balance. So I'm going to be empowered by disempowering other people. I was coaching a GOA client yesterday afternoon who was talking about her ADM. And when this ADM is under stress, he makes these little digs. These little things, I call it throwing tacks on the road, where you don't feel like you have your feet under you. You just kind of, you don't know where you stand, keeping people off balance. And so, and at the low average level, they become the bullies of the Enneagram, really protecting themselves by having power over people. And what happens to every type at the high level is they redefine their strategy to take in more. So if you're an Enneagram 8, that striving to be powerful will be there your whole life. It'll run through your life. You can look back at your life and you can see that that was a driving force in everything you've done in your life. It's really that powerful. A highly developed Enneagram 8, a highly developed challenger, redefines being powerful as being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to show my soft side, being willing to be more inclusive, not needing to keep people off balance. So the striving doesn't change, but the definition of it does. Any initial questions? Yeah.
Is the challenger a bully?
Depends on level. Depends on level of freedom. So at the high level, absolutely not. At the high level, deeply empowering. We just did an executive retreat for an ADM who's an Enneagram 8 who functions at quite a high level, not in the slightest. But one of the questions we would ask an 8, because all types have blind spots, so we don't ask 8s, are you intimidating? We ask if people perceive you as intimidating, because often they're not aware of the impact of that. So whether an 8 is a bully or not depends on level. I would say that if you're an Enneagram 8, you definitely get that sense. You definitely have gotten feedback. You can be intimidated. Mother Teresa, by the way, seems to be a good example of an Enneagram 8, who, from people who know her, said, I mean, amazing woman, but boy, could she be tough. So again, different qualities at different levels. Any other questions? Type 9. See, this is quite different. This is a type I mentioned for those 2 CEOs I'm working with. Peacemaker. I'm striving to be, I want to feel peaceful. If I want to feel peaceful, the good part of that is harmony matters to me. I have a natural presence where people kind of relax. I create that kind of sense of harmony. For those of you old enough to be aware of it, Ronald Reagan had that kind of a presence, whether he liked his politics or not. Kind of came on with his cardigan and his calmness, and you kind of felt like, yeah, the world may be having some weird stuff, but I feel okay. So at a high level, they're very good at mediating, very good at understanding multiple perspectives. At an average level, that demand to be comfortable, the demand to be peaceful, becomes avoiding conflict. And it becomes being pleasantly checked out. When we do longer Enneagram trainings, we have music for each type, and we have people guess what type it is. My favorite Enneagram 9 song is Comfortably Numb, Pink Floyd. So Enneagram 9 at the average level is nice and pleasantly checked out. Avoids conflict, and the way that I feel comfortable is by being here but not really being here. So Canada is a 9 culture. Nice. Avoiding difficult conversations. You own.
That sounds
and you see again the range from calm and reassuring down to complacent. 9s at an average level are good at being aware of everyone's position except their own. They tend to check out from their own needs often. An Enneagram 9 at a high level understands that to really get to harmony, to really get things to be comfortable, I have to deal with difficult things. I have to deal with them first. That's why those 2 clients of mine are having that be their morning practice. You understand that higher level peace, higher level harmony requires tough interaction. Questions? Type 1, the reformer. I'm striving to be perfect. What that looks like at a high level, by the way, the question I mentioned to you, Enneagram 8, if people are exploring that, we say, do people perceive you as intimidating? Enneagram 9, we ask people things like, do people perceive you as stubborn? Because underneath that pleasant exterior is quite a stubbornness. Enneagram 9s have a way of saying no this way. Well, this means I heard what you said, and I'm going to do exactly what I want to do in a very pleasant way. So Enneagram 1, the reformer striving to be perfect. At a high level, very values-driven, principle-driven. There's a love of goodness, doing things right. I want the world to be good. I want me to be good. The tendency of this type is to walk around with an internal yardstick about the way the world should be and the way I should be. I'm constantly judging myself and others against that. And almost always, I fall short and so do others. So there's this judgmental internal quality. That's part of why the question for Enneagram 1s is often, do people perceive you as critical? Because it's a blind spot. 1s say, I just gave her facts, objective feedback. But it comes across as critical. It can be patronizing, judgmental. See, principled, purposeful, down to perfectionistic. Again, at a high level, I really get that there's perfection in the moment. It's okay that things are the way they are and that things could improve. I stop judging myself and other people so harshly. At an average level, there's this constant judgmental quality that goes on and not meeting up to the standards that I hold for myself. Or maybe even thinking that I do, but the world doesn't. And there's a kind of secret internal voice that says the world would be a better place if there was more people like me. So principled. Yeah. Any questions? But all these 3 types, 8, 9, and 1, all have in common that secretly they don't want to be messed with. Autonomy really matters to them. And they have 3 different strategies for autonomy. So the Enneagram 8, the challenger, I'm going to demand autonomy. I am a force to be reckoned with. The 9, I'm going to have autonomy by checking out, having a very pleasant internal world. The 1, I'm going to try to not be messed with by being so good, so perfect that you can't mess with it. 3 very different strategies for the same core. Now the next 3 types have a core around image. image, how I'm seen is very, very, very important. Now, all of us like to be liked. All of us want people to love us, to respect us, to appreciate us. If you're one of these three types, it's been a constant theme throughout your life. It's not just a nice to have, it's a need to have. It's a have to have. So 3 variations on that. Enneagram 2, the mentor or the helper. Strive to be connected. If I'm Enneagram 2, I have a natural ability to tune into people. I walk into this room and I would just kind of know how each one of you is doing. I can just pick it up like radar. And there's a love of being of service, of being compassionate, empathetic. It's a very natural desire. And that's what shows up at the high level in this type. Florence Nightingale. When being connected is a demand, which is what happens at the average level, I start giving to get. I start needing to be needed. I start seeing that my value is in how helpful I am. And so I'm kind of happy when you need me. I foster relationships where I'm essential and indispensable. Obviously a trap for people who are in any kind of service profession. And part of what I do at the average level is I'm very aware of your needs, but I don't have anything. No, I'm fine, thanks. No, I don't need anything. And so I start not taking care of myself very well, because the whole pattern is what I need in connection is to have you need me, and so my needs will get in the way. At high levels, Enneagram 2 see that part of connection is I don't need to act on that all the time. Sometimes what people need the most is having not do anything and let them struggle with things themselves. And I also start reconnecting to what I need. That's often the path for the Enneagram 2. Questions? Yeah.
The descriptive words in the last line, it seems like one of them is not like the others.
Which one?
Well, intrusive.
Yeah, well, that's because at a high level, I'm caring and generous, but if I need to be needed, I'm going to insert myself in your life even when you're not asked for. I'm going to basically demand that you need me by, I show up and the next day I did some of your work for you. I don't really leave you alone. I demand to be part of your life in some way. Does that make sense? I think that's intrusive.
It does, but it seems to be, in some ways, opposite to some of the other words. Like,
exactly.
Like caring about someone else, but the intrusive sounds like the person's really caring about himself.
Exactly. Well, and that's why as you go down level, you often get the opposite behavior that happened at the high level. Because the more you go down, the more it's really self-oriented. See, at the high level, the giving is very generous. At the low level, it's giving to get. Everything has strings attached. So yeah, that's right. In the same way as Enneagram 8, the challenger, at a high level, loves to have people be empowered. At the low average level, disempowers other people. We worked with an 8 leader who was, he was very high in the organization, but not at the very senior level. And he was furious when anyone put any constriction on his freedom to lead. Meanwhile, in an organization, this was a high-end architecture company, where people were working 80 to 100 hours a week, literally. He had a watch. When people went out on lunch, he held it there to make sure they came back on time. So yeah, you see opposite behavior. Any other questions? Type 3. The achiever, striving to be outstanding. At a high level, very adaptive, flexible. There's a love of getting stuff done. There's a love of getting results, and can be very motivating to other people. Anthony Robbins, motivational, charismatic, trying to pull people along energetically. And again, the adaptability, you tell me what the goal is and I'll help us steer toward there. Very able to do that. When I demand to be outstanding, I'm going to become more self-promoting. I'm probably going to take too much credit. and I'm going to be so goal-focused that I may step on people along the way, not because I'm not a good person or I don't care about people, but because the goal is everything. I have got to get to the goal each time. It's almost a desperate need to do that. And so I don't think as much about the relationships along the way. This is the type that tends to be, when in task mode, the most effective way to do that is to turn my feelings off. Yeah, actually, another GOA leader I coached yesterday, who's under stress as a type 3, recognizes that she gets cool and efficient and actually not really caring about the people who are coming into her office, but just focused on how to get the work done. Kind of cuts off the feelings in service of efficient, task-driven behavior. At a high end, Enneagram 3s really understand that part of being outstanding is being an outstanding team player, not needing to have the spotlight be on them, being of service being more important than look at me, look how good I did. Questions?
Yeah, I do have a question about that one. Is there a gender difference? Because I sure find that there is in the world of business and law. I find that if there is a success-oriented, pragmatic type male, it's super accommodated. And the female, as much as you described in your situation where you're trying to get to the point, deal with things, people perceive that as somehow more uncaring because you're female.
Oh, absolutely.
Man, there's more generosity and forgiveness and, sort of the very same approach. Like I know people like that, the very same approach, but real big gender difference.
Oh, no, absolutely. So a couple of things about gender. So, watching 10 minutes now, get it done yet. Is first, there are gender stereotypes. So going back to Enneagram 2, there's a lot of women are socialized to be Enneagram 2s. The mom that bakes the cookies and has, that stuff going on. So there's gender stereotypes both ways. We're going to get to type in a minute where males who are that type tend to go underground because it's not accepted. But very much, the classic one, if we go back to 8 for a minute, healthy male 8s tend to be seen as assertive. Even healthy female 8s, the word goes from an A word to a B word. Right? They're judged. So absolutely, there's a lot of stereotypes around that. When Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook says, when's the last time you heard a male call it bossy? It can very much relate to this type. That's important. There's definitely contextual stereotypes.
Sorry, speaking from the perspective of a woman who has been called bossy and a bitch, and
Yes. And that was the B word. Yes.
And I was called masculine on more than one occasion, which I actually found really insulting.
Yeah.
Having worked for a lot of type 8 men and women, just to sort of play devil's advocate here a little bit, I do find a lot of those women are a lot more difficult. And the men will be difficult, they want to get it done, but there's no kind of sharp edge to that. Mm-hmm. Whereas a lot of time women in those roles, it's not just my gender expectation. I evaluate it carefully, and sometimes it really is something a bit more going on, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I do, and I'm pulled between that and getting through the types.
Yeah, but
I do want to respond to that briefly. All behavior has to be seen in context. And so one of the questions would be, if a woman has those tendencies and there's all the resistance to that and the judgments about that, how much of those hard edges were built up because I almost needed to have calluses? So how much of that is a response to the context as opposed to being a lower level of development of that type? If that makes sense?
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that later on. I'm going to get through. For the individualist, I'm striving to be unique. At a high level, I love individual expression. I like to bring that out in myself and other people. Very creative, innovative. I love depth, beauty, intimacy. Those things really matter to me. I feel things deeply. At the average level, if I demand to be unique, I define myself by how different I am than other people. And I tend to see that envy starts. I start to see that I don't get what other people get. I feel like things are unfair. People don't really get who I am. And because I'm unique and different, I give myself a right to act out of it. Like, I'm okay being emotionally volatile because I'm different than other people. So I really define myself that way. At a high level, I understand I don't have to find myself separate from other people to be unique. I can just find my own way of doing things. This is a type, male Enneagram 2s, helpers, are sometimes willing to identify themselves in an organizational setting. Male Enneagram 4s, unless they're in an area, advertising, architecture, some place where it's acceptable to be a deeply feeling person, go underground. In most organizational contexts, to be a man, to be touched and to have a tear roll down your cheek is not a cool thing to do. So Enneagram 4s in organizational settings often become almost like rocks, emotionless, because they're trying to not show their feelings. So this is one that's kind of the opposite. This is one where males don't really bring out their gifts if they're this type. Questions? So those three are all image points. There are all three different ways of trying to be noticed, wanting to be. So in Enneagram 2, I want to be noticed for how helpful I am, a 3 for how outstanding I am, and a 4 for how different I am. The last three types are all security ones. Safety and security is all very important to these three types. But again, very different expressions. 5, the observer or investigator. I'm striving to be knowing. At a high level, I want to make sense of the world. From a very early age, I was kind of an observer. I'd watch people almost like an anthropologist watching a different culture. I tried to make sense out of things. I sometimes call it the inner tinker toy. I want to form my own internal sense of how, I want to make sense of the world. I don't want to take someone else's idea and just implement it. A lot of the most amazing thinkers have been Enneagram 5s, Einstein, Stephen Hawking, because they create their own kind of unified picture of reality. So brilliant thinkers. At the average level, that striving to be knowing, I start to believe that the only way to do that is to kind of protect myself and keep myself separate from the world in some way. There's a lot of 5s in high tech, and when we do workshops with people in high tech, there's a weird experience where people's eyes are like one-way mirrors. You can tell that you're being looked at intensely, but there's no information coming back. And so we'll say things like, do something, throw tomatoes, applaud, give us some feedback, because the tendency is to be an observer but not to give information out. These are often the people in meetings who are seeing a huge amount that don't share it. And you see intense, cerebral, and they become more and more secretive and detached at lower levels because they're protecting themselves. It's kind of it's a very interesting type, very sensitive type, actually deeply sensitive internally, and feeling like the only way I can protect that sensitivity is by having this mental screen. It's almost like having a moat in a drawbridge and being very careful who I let into my life. And so you're not going to see that sensitivity. It's very much there. This again is Einstein at the high level, Unabomber at the low level. There was a wonderful biography of Einstein, came out a couple years ago, going clearly Enneagram 5, and there was this great line about him. He loved humanity and he tolerated people. It was kind of this withdrawing from social norms for the comfort of being in my head. 6, troubleshooter. Striving to be secure. Part of being secure is safety in being part of a team, safety in being loyal. If I'm a good friend to you, you will be a good friend to me. So I'm usually more self-effacing. I'm usually, I don't need to have the limelight. I don't need to be the star. I'm really comfortable with being part of a team. So really strong team players. And their mind has an ability to see what could go wrong ahead of time. At the high level, that's a useful thing. A lot of the best drivers are Enneagram 6s because they're actually thinking, what would I do if that person came into my lane? I worked with a head STARS pilot in the medical helicopters. The Enneagram 6 very useful to be on a mission and to be thinking many steps ahead of what could go wrong. At the average level, that mind that's looking for what could go wrong starts to be the naysayer. There's a yes but, yes but, yes but. There's a constant stream of anxiety of worrying what could go wrong. And they become seen as people who hold teams back sometimes because they're seeing what could go wrong. There's different variations on this. Some Enneagram 6s try to prove that they're not afraid by doing things that are really daring, but it's still kind of driven by fear. It's driven by anxiety. The experience sometimes internally is like having a committee in their heads with a lot of different voices but no chairperson. And so there's a lot of indecision and ambivalence that shows up. And last type, I have one minute as well. Type 7, the enthusiast. I'm striving to be excited. The natural children in the positive way of the Enneagram at the high level, able to have things be fun, interesting. Even if we're doing something that's mundane or tedious, hey, let's have fun with it. Let's find a way to have this be interesting. That love of chasing the next shiny object, which is very much part of this type, can also make it hard to follow through on things. Very good at problem solving. Well, the early stages of problem solving, the brainstorming phase. Much more difficult dotting the I's and crossing the T's and following through. A lot of the people that started .coms were Enneagram 7s who got involved in the exciting part and then handed it off. Richard Branson, a virgin, starts all kind of interesting, fascinating new stuff and then finds somebody to carry it out while he goes for the next really interesting thing. At the high level, I'm striving to be excited and to have positive experience. At the average level, I start avoiding negative experiences, don't bring me down, and so I don't deal with conflict well for a different reason. I just don't want negative feelings. And I can get more and more scattered at a lower level. Robin Williams showed up as a pretty troubled Enneagram 7 in a lot of ways. John Belushi. Almost driven to excess. So it looks like 9 types. Time for a couple of questions.
Do people have elements of each of these types in their personalities?
Correct, but at the root there's one. Yeah, both things are true. We can usually all relate to many or most or all of the 9 types. But the value of the Enneagram really starts when you get your type right, because every type has a different path of development. Every type has a particular focus point to be a better human being, to be a better professional, to be a better spouse, to be a better parent. And so getting the type right is really essential. So when we're doing executive teams in GOA, we do a longer introduction to the Enneagram with more depth. And then we use an assessment. The assessment's often accurate, but not always. But then we have individual meetings with people to make sure they get the type right, and then we get them together. Because, again, each type has a very different path. What I focus on each morning is different from my wife. So yeah, it becomes really important to go, what's the root? What's the core thing that organizes my life? Because every one of these 9. Everyone's one of these types, and nobody's more than one type.
I know in the last one you talked about negativity, but it almost seems like when you're doing this spectrum, if that's your main tendency, that really the midpoint would be, using it for your good purposes, like one side of the coin, and then sort of when you turn to the negative, that's the flip side of the coin. And almost if you can keep your leader focused on being grateful and, I'm not saying Pollyanna positive, but I'm just saying sort of that higher end. Is that something you do in your work, and how do you achieve that?
There's multiple questions in that. The client I had dinner with last night is too Pollyanna. It's too much trying to look at the positives and not being willing to look at the challenges. So The path is real. So I'm not. Tell me if this is answering the question, because I heard multiple things there that I don't know if I got it all.
How do you get into the higher part of the spectrum? I guess is my question.
With a point of awareness. With a point, and so I mentioned for the Enneagram 9, it could be what am I most wanting to avoid today. Those 2 9 CEOs start out each morning with what are my values? What actually matters to me the most? And given that, what conversations am I willing to have even though I don't want to? The Enneagram 3 that I coached yesterday, the achiever, it was how could I stay reconnected to my own feelings and my own experience so that I'm actually connected to the people I'm working with during a very high stress time in my ministry. So it's a very different focus for each person. And that's part of the value of the Enneagram is once you get to type, I find my coaching clients and organizational clients in general find that it becomes a steering point each day. It's a particular focus. And again, that's why getting the type right is so essential. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does sound to me like what you're really, each one has its own kind of trigger and the way they look at the world, and then you're making sure that they're not just sliding to the one side, they're looking at what their strengths are, I guess,
Correct.
And not their weaknesses, and then they're creating that awareness with your help of identifying them.
Yeah, correct. And when most people learn the Enneagram, it's kind of like a party game. Oh, let's talk about what type everyone is. Whereas from the outside in, the Enneagram becomes really useful when it's an inside-out experience. So I'm an Enneagram 3, and I know the higher side of my Enneagram 3. I know I can be very adaptive in achieving things. I also know the self-focusing that can get in my way. And part of what I've learned to do, sometimes well, sometimes not, ask my wife, is notice the arising of that drive for it's about me. Notice the arising. There's a particular energy that I feel when I realize I'm more focused right now on how I'm being seen than the different settings. And so getting the internal experience becomes really important. If you're an Enneagram 8, there's an internal experience of intensity. Everything's a bit too much. Everything's wrapped up a bit too much. I could go through the Enneagram. The internal experience of a 1 is this resentment, this nagging resentment that things just aren't the way they are, that people aren't the way they should be. Enneagram 9 that I just missed, there's an internal experience of kind of pleasant numbness. Kind of like I took a drug this morning, even though I didn't really. Enneagram 2, there's this inner sense of pride. I'm such a helpful person. The world would be so much better if more people were as helpful as I can be. Enneagram 3, there's that sense of my own self-importance. Enneagram 4, how unique I am. Enneagram 5, I don't suffer fools. People have such dumb ideas. And there's also withholding of, I'm not going to tell you much about me. I'll tell you about my ideas, but not about me. Internal experience of a 6 is anxiety. Sometimes it's turned up high, sometimes it's not. Internal experience of 7 is like this gluttony of, I want more and more experiences. It's never enough. I'm always going for the next shiny thing. I'm insatiable. So when you get the internal experience of the type, it becomes really useful. You can tell when that's turned way up, Technicolor, or when it's really down to a very low simmer. But when you really get your type right, it's always there. So as an Enneagram 3, that pull to be more focused on how I'm being seen and what I can offer, it's never going to go away. I can get better and better at managing.
And then do you do work with interactions between them?
Totally, yeah. Again, client yesterday, her ADM was really interested in this too, and I sent them a thing about how those 2 types interact at high levels and low levels. And it's become a really good dialogue point. Yeah, that's very useful.
I can see how the training works for individual coaching, and I'm just wondering how you apply it to an organization. Yeah. Is it more just teaching people to understand themselves individually,
it's multiple things. It's understanding themselves individually. It's seeing how the types interact. So seeing at high levels and not so high levels how the team works together. Also, every organization has an Enneagram type. So Canada has a type, but so do organizations.
Okay.
And that can be different. The law department may have a very different type than the accounting department, even within the same ministry, for example. And so understanding the impact of that becomes really useful because it'll impact how the types show up. And also just understanding the organizational culture and which types is more supported and what their challenges would be within that. So it becomes really useful in an organizational level. Yeah.
Do some employment recruiters use these types, and are some of the types considered more suitable for some types of employment and not others?
Good question. Legally, you should never use it because what you really want is someone who's at a high level of a type. Okay, quick story. Did any of you ever see the movie Misery? Good. It'll fit in. I did an Enneagram training for a natural gas company in the U.S. some time back. And the owner, CEO, loves the Enneagram. But part of what I said to him is you cannot use the Enneagram to hire because you don't know what level somebody's functioning at. And so I had dinner with him a couple of years ago, ran into him in San Diego. And he said, oh, we've been using an Enneagram assessment to hire people. First I said, legally you can't do that. And he said, oh no, so we want all of our customer service people to be Enneagram 2s, helpers, people who are kind and want to be of service. So I said to him, have you seen the movie Misery? Now, have any of you seen Misery? Okay. For anyone who hasn't, can you describe the Kathy Bates character?
Oh yes, she had needs that drove her to do terrible things.
Yes, and yeah, and to be of service, she hobbles the guy, she breaks his ankles, and then with a smile nurses him back to health. So fortunately, I said, have you seen Misery? And I said, well, he said to him, that's great you're using the Enneagram for hiring. There's only one problem. You don't know if you're going to get Florence Nightingale or that Kathy Bates character. Hopefully he stopped doing it after that. Because the types get radically different at different levels. And so it shouldn't be used that way. If you ask me who would make the best leader in an organization, I'd throw out the Enneagram type and take the person who functions at the highest level within that type. They have the most freedom. Really no type is better than any other type. Some types will gravitate towards some professions more, for sure. But it doesn't mean that they're better leaders, and I certainly would have used it for hiring.
Sorry, would you agree that the first three you identified are sort of more left brain, and the last three are more right brain, and the other ones are kind of balanced?
No, I wouldn't. And partially because there's a lot of research that actually saying that what we call common knowledge about left brain and right brain is not actually true. That's not actually how the brain is organized. But even if it was the way we thought it was, no, I wouldn't say that. Enneagram 5s can be very left brain logical based on that left brain, right brain thing, for example. No, I wouldn't.
I didn't read the Odyssey, but I did read very extensive analysis of Homer's writings, and the Iliad and the Odyssey, and how almost every major novel 1,000 years later, 2,000 years later, can be traced back to Homer's writing. I found it fascinating. So I was curious. You said that the Odyssey, Homer either becomes or experiences these 9 types.
In order. Yeah.
How do you relate, like, the enthusiast? What chapter was that?
So I can't do them all. There's a book called Traveling with Odysseus, where a colleague of ours actually goes through that. He doesn't mention the Enneagram. I'm not sure why he didn't. But type 9 was Soma, the people who were nicely, pleasantly out of it. 8 was a Cyclops.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
The creatures that he, or the humans that he interacted with.
Or the cultures, yes, exactly.
In each of his
with
lives.
Remarkable specificity. Yeah.
Homer, whoever he may have been, or maybe there were several of them, remarkable individual to have written that 2,500 years ago.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, so if you read Travels with Odysseus, or Traveling with Odysseus, that's our friend Michael Goldberg wrote that. And he goes through the 9 realms in great detail. Anything else? More